हेलो एवरीवन, वी हैव टू डिस्कस अबाउट दैट। और पार्ट 2 देख लेते हैं क्वेश्चन आंसर राइटिंग का। क्वेश्चन नंबर 1, सोशल मीडिया इन सिग्निफिकेंटली इम्पैक्ट एन एडोलसेंट in contemporary society. Analyze whether and imposing age and restrictions on social media can efficiently protect youth individuals for if C and misers might lead to the unintended consequences. 10 minutes. Introduction. Social media is influences with debates or whether and age and restrictions can efficiently address its the potential harms or lead to the unintended and consequences. Body role of social media in adolescent and lives. Social connections, facilities, peers and the interactions and community. Enable access to best education resources, enhancing the digital library and skills. 5-minute break after study. हाँ, आंसर देख लेते हैं। सोशल रोल ऑफ द सोशल मीडिया इज इन एडोलसेंट लाइफ। सोशल कनेक्शंस फैसिलिटेट peers and interactions and community building adhering in social skills development. And Pew Research 2023 and found that 71% of the teenagers feel more the connection through the social media. Self-expression and unity formations provided other platform for youth to explore identities and express themselves freely. UNICEF and reports in 2022 and show that social media fosters and self the identify among 62% of the teens and access to information and Gill developed. Developed enable access to best the educational resources, enhancing the digital. For the digital literacy and skills, and LinkedIn and Facebook offers workshops on the digital skill for youth pupils, support for marginalized unities, and create safe space for marginalized groups to find supports and understanding LGBTQ plus communities benefits from the online peers supports and network, as the noted and by other 2023 UNICEF study. Potential benefits of the imposing age restrictions, mental health safeguards, and reduce the exposure to connect the linkage with the anoxies, depressions, and mental health issues among youth. WHO 2022 reports other 20% increase in mental 20% decreased in mental health risk in years with and the limited social media's exposures and protections from the harmful context and limits and expose in the inappropriated and or damages contest reducing risk of the negatives and influences. The Americans and the Physiological Association 2023 and found that social medias and use the increases exposures and to the cyber and bullying by 30%. Reductions in online exploitations helps and curbs risk of predators and the behavior and exploitation targeting young users. A 2023 reports and by the National Centers for the Missing and the Exploited and Children's highlighted a 15% rise in the online exploitation cases involving youth. Preventions of screen addictions and controls and excessive screen times and supporting the better health and offline engagement. South Korea regulations 2021 on the digital media's limit screen addictions among the minors. Unintended and consequences of age restrictions, enforcement challenges, age verification systems are often bypassed, making the restriction difficulties to enforce. And UK studies 2022 show 30% of teens bypass ages checks and with the minimal effort and digital literacy gaps. Age bans can and the limits digital and e-learnings, leavings and youth the unpraised and for the responsible online interactions. And be internet awesomes why the Google's promotes the digital safety and emphasis education over the restrictions, reduce the socials and inclusions and restrictings and access can the insole insulate teens and preventing them and from the engaging in important social dialogues. UNICEF 2023 notes the social medias aid the inclusively and especially and for the marginalized group like the LGBTQ plus youth and risk of the alternative platforms and bans on the major platforms and may push youth and towards less and the regularities and potentially more harmful side. In countries with the restrictions and teens have the turned and to niche platforms and with the favors, safety controls and increasing the risk exposures. Way forward, promote digital literacy and awareness and introduced the comprehensive digital literacy programs in schools to the educates youth on safe online practices and easy the Finlanded media's literacy big trends and student in digital safety and the critical thinkings encourages patientials and engagement provided resources to help patients monitoring and guide their the children's social media uses. The 2017 and Child Online and Protection Frameworks by the ITU and emphasis parentals and roles in digital and guidance. Implement targeted contract content and controlled. Focus on restricting and harmful and content rather than basket. The 2017 and Child and Old Online Protection Frameworks by the ITU emphasis and patiential roles in digital guidelines. In digital guidelines, digital guidelines. Implement targeted content and control the focus on restricting and harmful content and rather than the blanket and age restrictions allowing the safe and the moderate uses. And France 2022 and selective restrictions on content like the gamblings and the violence protect youth and without the complaint bans. Conclusion, while age restrictions on the social media can offer the protections, a balanced approach and that the combined and digital education, patient and involvement and targeted and content regulation is more and practicals in the safeguardings and the adolescent and while the allowing them to the benefits from the social media and responsibilities. Analyze the challenges and poses by the declines total and fertility rate and TFR in India's and what measures and can be taken to balance the demographic trends and with the sustainable economic growth. Introduction, India declining total fertility rates and TFR and indicated is the shift towards on the egoing populations and impacting the workforce and economic sustainability and this the demographics changes demand proactive and the policies to maintain the growth and balance body declining TFR in India's and key the facts and repeats decline in TFR in India's the TFR has the fallen from the 2.6 in 2010 to 1.99 in 2023 below the replacement and levels and in the most state sources NFHS 5 and regionals the variations and southern state like the Keralas and Tamil Nadu and show the TFR as below 1.75 while the fuse and the northern states and maintain the higher rates. Urban rural differences and urban areas and witnessed and lower the fertility rates and due to the lifestyles and changes the economic pressures and career priorities increasing life expectancy with life expectancy including to around and 70 years, and the independency and ratio is then the to rise, and especially in the elderly populations. Challenge of declining TFR, shrinking workforce and either declining TFR and reduced the working age populations and the impacting productivity and economic growth. By 2023 2030, India workforce is the expected to decline the similar to trends in the China and Japan. Rising dependency ratio lowers TFR, increasing the number of independent particularly and the elderly, and which the state health care and social security systems, e.g. Japan and aging populations has led to increase the public's expenditures on healthcare and potential economic slowdowns and favors young and the workers, leads to other short and economic as the consumer demand and the innovations, and may the decline without youth driven consumptions, and countries in Europe has been the slower GDP's growth linked to low fertility rates, gender and labor and force imbalanced, declining TFR and coupled with low females labors and force the participations leads to the limited active workforce in India's females labor force participations and rate the remain low at the around 20%, sources World Bank. The socio and the cultural implication with favors and young and the individuals and elderly and supports. Elderly support structures and within the families and could begin and shifting the care burdens to public services measures to balance a demographic trend and with the sustainable growth, increasing female workforce participations, policy support for working women and enhance the maternity leaves and flexible work arrangement and the affordable child care facilities and the Scandinavia. Boosting labor and the productivities and investment in the autonomous and technology. Industry can adopt the automations and to offer offset a smaller workforce. Example, Japan uses the robotics in manufacturing to counter its the aging populations. Education and skill development focus on the vocational and skills trainings to build a high skilled labor force. The National Education Policy NEP and to 2020 aims to the enhance employable skills in youth. Social security and health care for the elderly, universal pension schemes and expanding pensions coverage to all the elderly, ensuring economic security in old age. The Atal Pension Yojana provided the pensions covering for workers to the former. Healthcare infrastructures and expansions strength and the geriatric healthcare and are the setting up and elders care contact. NPHCEN provided the comprehensively care for the senior citizens and encouraging migrations for workforce supports. Internal migrations policy promotes the urban-rural migration initiatives to balanced and workforce and the distributions like China's Hokus and reforms the aims to the encouraging rural migrations to urban center. International Migration Agreement collaborate with other. International Migration Agreement collaborate with other country to support the skills and the Indian migration. International Migration Agreement collaborations with the others country to support the skilled India's and migration for the global workforce demand supporting family and friendly policies in incentives and for the child and the bearings financial support tax and breed or the subsidies and for the young and families to encourage the higher fertility. Example, Singapore offers the financial incentives and for the families with the multiple children, community-based childcare supports and providing the affordables and the accessible and the childcare options to use the burdens on your parents. Example. Japan extensive childcare supports systems and have the boost and family well-beings and birth rates promoting the economics and the diversifications, developing high value services and sectors. Promoting economic diversity development high value surface services sectors and focus on the sectors like the IT and pharmaceutical and financial that and the required and favor the workers and but the generate and high the productivity. Rural entrepreneurships and agricultural modernization supports the agricultural productivity and rural entrepreneurships to retain a the rural workforce. Conclusion. India demographic and transitions calls for the proactive and strategies to adapt and to other declining TFR with targeted policies to enhance productivities, labor participations, and social supports. India can the leverages it is the demographics changes and for the sustainable growth and the economic resilience. Question. Examines the prevents and the impact of violences and against the marginalized communities, particularly and LGBTQIA plus individuals in urban Indias, and what effective measures and can be the taken to protect thus and the community from violence. Introduction. Violence against the marginalized community in urban India, especially LGBTQIA plus individuals, and remains other perspectives challenges and urbanization and rising the visibilities and have the unfortunately increased vulnerabilities to targeted the violence and discriminations in cities and body the prevalence of violence high indicates in the metropolitan areas and urban the areas sees the increased visibilities of marginalized group but also the greater intensity of the discrimination and violence, e.g. in other 2024 study by the BMC and Public Health, 78.7% of the gay men and 44% of the bisexuals and men in the 6 cities reported experiencing and the violence. Type of violence and faced and the includes Delhi reported the highest and prevalence of the sexual violence against the man at the 44% of the sources. BMC Public Health 2024. Discrimination due to the intersectionals and identities violence and is more the prevalent and among the individuals and with the intersecting marginalized identities and such as the caste, religions and income. The study noted and that the 84.1% of OBCs and 71.6% of SC and STs LGBTQIA plus responded and faced the violence and legal gaps in the protections. The Bharatiya and the Nyaya Sanhita BNS and lacks the prohibitions addressing sexual violence against men, transgenders and individuals and creating a significant legal void. Societal and prejudices, hate and crimes, the persistences and the social stigma. Social stigma, persistence and the social stigma. LGBTQIA plus individuals in cities and IA. Example 2023 and NCRB and data recorded increasing health crimes and against the LG and BTQIA individuals and reflecting a need for the focus anti and the discrimination law and impact of violence. Physiological effect high rates of mental health issues and including the depressions and anxiety and arise due to the prolonged and discriminations studied by the Neem and Hans and show the higher rates of PTSD amongst the LG and BTQIA plus individuals and exposed to the regular harassment, economic and development discriminations and violence and discriminations limits. Access to employment opportunities and economic security. A 2022 and reports by the Human Rights and Watch highlighted the 50% and employments and the discrimination rate among the LGBTQIA plus individuals. social exclusions and alienation, the stigmas and contributes to the social and the isolations and often the limiting access to healthcare, housing and the community resources. XMEG accounting to other 2023 UN reports and LGBTQIA plus individuals and face 1.5 times and higher the healthcare discriminations rate. Effective and the measures to protest and marginalized and communities and inclusive legal frameworks and amend the laws like the BNS to include the provisions for men and the transgenders rape to address and thus the gaps to the protections. The Justice and the Burma Committee 2013 and recommended the expanding the definitions of sexual assault. Awareness and sensitizations and programs and educate the communities and law enforcement on LGBTQIA plus rights to reduce the stigmas and the violence. EGN initiatives by the Ranaj and the foundations and conducts the sensitizations works for police and across the India, save and reporting the mechanism and the established confidentials and the accessibilities reporting channels and for the marginalized groups to report the violence and safety and the Mumbai dials and 1919 and helpline the offers and dedicated supports to the LG and BTQIA plus individuals facing violence supportive public health programs and integrated the mental health supports and within the public health and the services to address the physiological impact of violence. The national mental health and programs has started pilot initiatives for the LGBTQIA plus mental health social protections policies developed and targeted employment and housing schemes for the marginalized communities to reduce economic vulnerabilities and Kerala's LGBTQIA and plus policy 2019 provided housing and employment support to the choir and individuals school and workspace and anti and the discrimination policy and mandate anti and the discrimination policies in educationals and the institution and frameworks to foster the inclusive and the environments and Delhi University's genders sensitizations community enforce the policies to prevent the harassment based on gender identity legal aid support and services provides dedicated and legal aids for the support for LGBTQIA and plus the individuals and to ensure access to justice and legal supports and Karnataka's State Legal Services Authority recently launched free legals for the clinicals and for LGBTQIA plus persons. Conclusion protesting and the marginalized group in urban Indias and required and legal the frameworks communities engagement and the collaborations and with the civil society and with and the inclusive and the multi and the faceted approach India can the progress and towards other societies and that is safe and the supporting for all examination the involving and the aspirations of youth of young Indian women in the last decades and how are those and the aspirations challenging traditional societal structures and norms. The aspirations of the young Indian women have been other transformation shift over the past decades and reflecting others and growing the autonomy and the educations and participations in the workforces and this the evolutions is significantly redefining and India societals and the landscapes. involving aspirations of young Indians, women, and higher education and skills development. Girls and now have nears equals educational attachment by boys, and with the over 50% of the young women completing class 12th and 26 attending in the college degrees and IEH. DS 2022 and 24 National Samples Survey 2017 and 18 highlights rising females enrollment in higher education with the female gross enrollments ratios reaching 27.3% and career the oriented goals. Young women increasingly and prioritize and professional ambitions and influences by access to varied and careers path and digital skills platforms. The Skill India missions and programs like the STEM for the Girls India have thus spurred young and powers involvement in technical field. Delay and selective and marriage choice and the average age to aid the marriage has the increased and from the 18.3 in 2005 in the 2 and the 22 years in the 2021 NFHS and 5 and with the more young women choosing the partners and based on the compatibilities and IHDS 2022 reports 52% of the women had either say in partners selections with selection UP from 42% in 2012 and enhance the financial autonomy, and many the young and women are the striving for the economics and the independence, particularly through the entrepreneurship due to the government support for the females led startup women entrepreneurship platforms and WEP, and why the Niti Aayog has the first trade in a network of the over 10,000 females entrepreneurships, increased political and social engagement. Young women are more the politically and active the with and the rising participation in self-help groups and SHGs and local the government. Local governance and SHG memberships among the rural women grew from 10% in 2012 and to 18% in 2022 IHDS 2022. How does aspirations challenges traditional societal and structural and norms and redefining gender roles and as more the women's and purposes careers traditional genders operations within the household are the changing. Manregas provided equal pay for the men and women influencing rural and household dynamics economic services, and 2022 and 23 intra household and dynamics economic survey 2022-23 intra and household decisions makings and powers, and with the greater education and income and youth the women now have more and the influences in family financial and the social decisions manage the challenges the conventionals and the structures of arranged marriage. NFHS 2019 and 21 and report other decline in the child marriages and the preference for the later unions and shift in the societal and expectations of females and mobilities. Increased independence has the normalizations women's solo travels for the education or works, challenging societal and restrictions. Example 54% of women and who the feel comfortable traveling and alone by the bus or the train and compared to the 42% in the 2012 and IHDS 2022 and demand for the equal rights in the workforce. shift societal expectations of female mobilities and increase the independence has the normalized and women's solo travels for education or works, challenging the societal restrictions. Example 54% of women. Shift in social expectations of female mobilities and increase the independence has the normalizations women solos troubles for and the education or works challenges and the societal restrictions. 54% of women and now and feel the comfortable traveling alone and by the bus or the train compared to the 42% in the 2012. Conclusion: the evolving aspirations of young Indian women are the progressively and the reducing the India socials and fabric the fostering other socials whether genders equalities and the women's strategy becomes the norms and ensuring the supportive and colonies can the accelerate and this shift and the wavings the ways for and the inclusively and the power future. English and the comparative and the policies can the accelerate this shift and paving the key and for other and the exclusively and the empower futures. Ragging in educational institution is other reflections of societal and the hierarchies and the normalizations of violence. Analyze Analyze the socio-cultural route for remarriages in India and suggested the features. Ragging often discussed as and the initials and the rituals reflected entrenched and the societal and the hierarchies and the normalizations of power imbalances and this the practice undermines the value of equalities and dignities and causing the lasting harms to India harms to students and the physiological and the socio well-being's body. Ragging as other reflections of social and the hierarchy and the normalizations of bullying and the perpetuations of hierarchies and Indian the society stratified and structure of caste class and the society and the seniorities encourage and dominances based the interactions in educational space, e.g. cases of the caste based raggings and reportations. Raging in often the perceive and as other traditionals to the establish the seniority and reflecting the social and the tolerance for cancer shifts powers dynamics and seniors in the professionals colleges impose and ragings to the ran forces other culturals of the response respect and the whiling as the socializations the normalizations of buying as other socializations tools the mirrors and pattern of the individuals initials rituals in workplaces and the communities. Example studies show and 60% of raising in the incident and are the justified as the buildings and Camarade and the NCRB and 2022 and fears of the exclusions, fears the pressures and drives and students to the comply and with or the participated and ragings to avoid the socials and the obstructions. Example survey and reveals that the 30% of the students fear the isolations and if they the racist raging Indians Physiological Society 2022. Socio and cultural roots of runner raggings in India, historical legacy. Ragging organizations in colonial era and bordering the schools wears and initiatives rights and forced and forced. Example similar practices in military academics and the influences professional college raising tradition. Caste and the religion and the prejudices. Caste and religion prejudices students from the marginalized or the rural background are the often and targeted for their the appearance and accent or the social identities and Dalit students face the targeted and ragging in the institution as the highlighted by the National Dalit and movement for just 2023 gender dynamic raggings and often the reflected toxin as masculinities and where the male students are the forces to assert theirs the manliness sexualized and the ragging in measures to the address the issue effectively. Strict the enforcement of anti and the ragging laws and ensures the compliance and with the UGC 2009 guidelines imposing the penalties for the offenders and negligent and institutions. The 24 into 7 ragging the helpline portals and resolve 95% of reported cases in the 2023 institutional reforms. Promoting and the positive and peers the interactions and introduce the mentorship programs and for the healthy senior junior relationships and Delhi University and Buddy the programs and imposed for healthy and the senior junior relationships and Delhi University body and the programs and improve the compositions and dynamics and engaging. And UNCF the activities and the work or the anti. engaging civil society and the media and collaborations and with the NGOs and for the anti-raggings and competition and regulations, medias and proposals and of raggings. Technology for the surveillances and the reportings installed and CCTV cameras and providing the mobile app and for the anonymous and combat and reporting UGC and anti the ragging apps and facilitated easy and reportings and the actions and the conclusions sensitivizations and workshops and works word conclusions and or the diversity workforce to promote respect and empathy among the student. TISS organizations workshops and to the fosters and the interculturals and the understandings in the student community. Raging deeply. Inclusion of the Divyangjan is other concern of the equitable and development and enzyme.